Welcome back to This Is Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. With me, I have Professor Bola Akinterinwa, Director General Bolitech Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Professor David Aworawo, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos, Nigeria. And Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office in Love. Well, we've had two guests on this program. First, Clement Nwanko, who commented on various aspects of the electoral process in Nigeria, February 25, March 18, and the fallouts. And we also had on the program also, our second guest, who talked about census. Chief Wale Kalejaye was a bit apprehensive about the census. He talked about the importance of data and how, in his own reckoning, he doesn't think that Nigeria is prepared for this census coming back to back with the elections this year, even though he being a data scientist and a cloud services analyst saying, okay, you need data for growth. But are we ready? Are we just shooting in the dark? Do we even have the resources? He raised all of those questions. But let's interrogate those two major issues that we've been looking at on this program, today. Let me start with you. You are right next to me, Professor Aworawo.
Yeah, I want to begin with Clement Nwanko's submission on the election and the action that many countries of the West, are planning to take, against those who are identified to have attempted to subvert the smoothness of the election. We can't talk about the election enough because it is threatening to, turn the whole place topsy-turvy. A fortnight ago when we commented on this, I stated that it will appear as if INEC didn't understand the enormity of the tax before it and the importance of conducting free, fair, and credible election. And now the bird has come to roost. We have four political parties, three of them intensely claiming that they won the election. That has arisen because the elections there were too many irregularities in the election, which has given room to political parties claiming that they won the election. The thing has gone to, of course, two of them have gone to court. There are so many disturbing dimensions as far as the election is concerned. A group is saying that the president-elect, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, should not be sworn on 29th of May, that they would try to disrupt, the events if that were to take place. Another group is saying we'll counter them if they attempt to do so. These are issues that are concerning. What we want to say is that there is a process. Election will hold. If some individuals are not satisfied with the results as declared, they go to court. The court will rule, and that will be final. Everybody should be made to understand this very clearly. There is no room for saying, if the legal process does not conclude before 29th of May, we don't hope it will conclude before then. The president will be sworn in. That's what the Constitution says, and that's what has been the practice since the Fourth Republic started. Anybody trying to say that, the president will not be sworn in is, calling for anarchy, which is not acceptable. But we want to also appeal to the judiciary to be careful because everything now is, at the feet of the judiciary to ensure that stability takes place. They should be fair. They should be transparent. They shouldn't do anything to suggest that they are taking sides. Comments such as the Chief Justice made some time ago, even though he said he was joking, such comments should be avoided, where he was saying, he liked the G5, he praised the G. These are the kind of comments that will be made, and people will think that a particular judicial official is siding one side and against another side. The other issue also is that issue of substance versus technicality. Any judgment that technicality is taking precedence over substance cannot be a good judgment. And now that the atmosphere is so charged, one would expect the judiciary to be fair and to focus on substance in, deciding which way, the final election thing goes. That is the only way we can have stability in the post-election period. But to all Nigerians, we should know that only one person will be president on 29th of May, not two, not three. And so the atmosphere needs to go down, the temperature needs to go down. We have to have a country and stability to be able to forge ahead. And so these claims, counter-claims, I've seen some figures that some political parties have put out, ridiculous. Political parties that didn't have any serious grounding in some states. Oh, a man won 50-something% in that state. People have to be realistic about what has happened, the expectations. But above all, the judiciary, we are appealing to them to help us so that stability can, exist between the 29th of May and post 29th of May. As to the governments that are trying to sanction those who have contributed to the election not being fair and fair, that is supported. They should be meticulous in compiling the list. They should take action. That will help us to, moving forward, people will be less inclined towards, election malpractice. If that's the only way, one of the ways that these countries can assist in deepening democracy in Nigeria.
Well, Professor Akinterinwa, I know you have your thoughts about the electoral process, but okay, Chief Kalejaye was talking about census, a data scientist and all that. He was saying, oh, we need data for planning, for economic growth. Okay, do we ever respect data in this country? Is this a country that needs data? Is this a country, that uses data? Or is this a country that, even if we do the census, let's imagine we do it, what will come out of it? Where there's already an established tradition in terms of, which part of the country should get more, what part of the country should get less, and people who are born to rule, and people who are born to suffer, and, well, Prof, over to you.
Well, I don't know why you always like asking me very tough, very difficult questions. You too, you have provided one of the answers. You see, if you look at the problem historically, right from 1866, when for the first time the British organized a census, and 6 years after, from 1871, and they continuously organize census on a 10-yearly basis, you will discover that, grosso modo, there have always been problems after problems. If you look at, well, in between the two world wars, the problems were a little bit different. But when you look critically at the census of 1931 and the census of 1952-1953, the critical major problems are still being witnessed today. For instance, you will discover that the issue of the principle of simultaneity, having the census taking place simultaneously in the whole country, rather than staggering it, it was an issue. When you look at the exact population based on ethnic basis, controversy was the issue. Now when you even come to Nigeria in the post-independence era, you will discover that at the end of the day, the issue of trust which you raised, and I was particularly glad when you raised the point, the problem is not postponing election, the problem is not even data. The issue is, what do you want to do with the data? The data, is it for fraudulent purposes? The way you have 10 votes, you add 0 to it. 10 becomes 100. Now, what will happen to the census we are going to carry out? You come to my village, you come to Ondo, for instance, now, and the population says 200. Then you take 0 away, it becomes 20. Then you go to another place, you add that 0 you take from one place to another. That is the issue. You see, data is very important for we researchers. Researchers, in fact, data is the blood flowing in the blood vessels of scholars. You don't have data, what are you going to analyze? Now, in Nigeria, for instance, nobody can categorically say this is the population of XYZ. There is controversy at the level of Yoruba and Igbo. Who is more populous? If you look at the 1931 census figures, compare with the 1952-53 figures, etc. all along, you will discover, I think I have the record for 1931. Hausa population was 3,004,016. The Igbo had 3,172,789. Yoruba 3,166,154. Fulani 2,026,189. Kanuri, etc. Now, when you look at the subsequent figures, and now you now have fundamental changes there, then you will ask, is it that one ethnic group is more able to produce more than the other?
No, Prof.
No, I'm coming.
The Igbos, there was a genocide of 1967 to 70. I hope you factor that into your analysis.
No, that's not the issue. That's not where I'm going to.
Okay.
You see, I'm trying to explain data in the different contexts that I, as a scholar, you are giving me the dynamics for analysis to understand. And that one I do appreciate. But what I'm saying here is that in the context of 2023 census, because you rightly pointed to the critical issue, it is the trust. I, for instance, the likelihood of my trusting any commission coming with any figures is neither here nor there. I have to look at it more critically because I don't believe in them. I will not even believe in their declaratory statements. Even when you give me their figures, I will not have to go and compare with institutions that are believed not to have any bias, to be very clear. That is the issue. So now, census for what? When the British started with this issue of census, it was basically for taxation. Basically. Then they added the argument of developmental planning. We knew this. But for us in Nigeria, what we need census for is not simply for taxation, it's not just development. We need harmonization. We need national unity. We need that particular trust that, okay, look, you are more populous, fine, than my ethnic group. So when it comes to financial allocations or resources, because you are more populous, I will not doubt, I will not complain. But the moment you make me believe that in Ondo State you can count goats, you can count dogs, you can count all those things as population, then there is problem. So that is the issue.
Okay, Yemi Adamolekun, let me come to you. Would the census exercise promote the objectives of federalism? And then, of course, what do you think of this election? A lot of people have been saying, oh, now that the elections have been won and lost, what we need now is healing and reconciliation. The president-elect, in fact, issued a statement to that effect. How do we heal? How do we reconcile? How do we repair the wounds that have been inflicted on our psyche and on many Nigerians physically?
Well, I guess in interesting ways, I think they're both tied together. So I agree with quite a number of things that Clement Nwako said earlier, both about the Huwais panel, which is now, over a decade, almost going on to 15 years. And the fact that, yes, some recommendations have been taken, but Other critical ones still have not been taken. And the fact that despite the positives, I mean, you were trying to prod him for positives, and there are positives, as he highlighted, the fact that technology is now encoded in our law. And I always use Alex Oti as a good example because he won this time around. I believe it was in 2015 that he likely won that election as well. But because technology was not encoded in our law, the judge chose to throw out the evidence that the card reader would have provided that would have helped his case in court. So I think for me, that's a really good example of how our process has improved and how technology has played a role in that game. But I think one thing that's critical, though, is how do citizens hold MDAs accountable? So the gentleman that was here earlier was talking about holding the Population Commission accountable. If you don't do this, then what? I don't think we should wait till if they don't. I think what we need to do is ensure that they do. And how do we do that? I think a big part of that is reviewing INEC's process. So as was said, there are a lot of calls that the process should be reviewed. What happened? What went wrong? What were the human failings? What were the technology failings? And it would be very remiss of us to have spent almost ₦500 billion on an election and then want to spend ₦1 trillion on a census, both leveraging enumerators, human beings, and technology. Same process as INEC, same process at NPC for different objectives, but without having reviewed what went wrong with INEC. What would say, as Prof is saying, that enumerators don't get funny with numbers, even though people will have individual profiles, but it doesn't stop people from dipping into Cameroon or dipping into Benin Republic, dipping into Niger to add a few people across the border. Hey, how do we ensure that doesn't happen? How do we ensure that technology doesn't fail? So I think for me, two important things before we have a census, and I think next month is certainly too soon. Oh, not next month, now May. So we're almost in April anyway. Number one, INEC's review process must be done and completed. I think it will be a waste of an opportunity to learn from the failures of INEC to enable the NPC to go into another process of using technology to do something with Nigerians. And then number two, we have too many data sets. So there's the voters register, there's the driver's license database, there's the passport database, there's BVN, there's NIN. We have all these databases that are not speaking to each other. Now we want to add a census to it. I think really the legislature must pass a bill, an act, whatever, a law that basically allows us to consolidate all these things through the census process. So imagine if the census devices have access to people who have NINs. So starting point, do you have an NIN? I type in your NIN, your profile pops up. And so I'm just basically editing what is there, making sure it's correct, making sure you're the one and you're counted. So one, it reduces work. And two, as a country, it allows us to then have data that actually makes sense. And that speaks a bit to what Professor Akinterinwa was talking about, so that there's a bit more trust in the data that we have. We don't trust, one of my ones likes to say that Nigerians don't like to count and we don't know how to count. But I think if we are able to put the trust in this process, so yes, even if one group is more than another, there's clarity and people trust the process, which again also ties to our elections. The election is not really, I think you have very difficult conversations with Nigerians when you talk about who won or who lost. The real issue was, it's a process issue. The process was not followed. The process failed. So regardless of what the outcomes are, people are unable to accept outcomes when it was very glaring that the process was flawed. So if the process worked, whoever came out as a winner, everybody will be all right. And to back of that as well, sorry, I'm just kind of trying to connect these dots, and I hope people are seeing how they are all linked together. As Professor Aworawo said, come May 29, a president will be sworn in, because our electoral law as well does not provide for the legal process to be done before he's swearing in. So which is where we've seen governors being changed, and that's the same thing for the presidential level as well. So the process will not be done by May 29 unless something very out of the ordinary happens. So a president will be sworn in, all things being equal. So citizens should also be clear about that. And to your point, anything threatening otherwise is a claim for anarchy. So the NPC should not discard the lessons that they can learn from INEC's experience. I think they're critical. And it will be a waste of money for this country to have spent 500 billion or 500 trillion naira on INEC, and then we want to throw 1 trillion on NPC without the lessons that are quite glaring that we need to learn.
Yeah, the MPC is looking for 896 billion naira, almost 1 trillion, as Yemi Adamolekun has pointed out. But the connecting dots are instructive between the performance of INEC and what Nigerians will expect from the National Population Commission. Let's look at another major institution in Nigeria and what it has been doing in the last few days, the Central Bank of Nigeria, which has confirmed the evacuation of banknotes from its vaults to commercial banks across the country as part of a coordinated effort to ease the circulation of banknotes of various denominations. In the meantime, the Apex Bank has also directed all commercial banks to open for operation on Saturdays and Sundays. The Acting Director, Corporate Communications Department of the bank, Dr. Isa Abdulmumin, disclosed this in Abuja last Friday and stated that a substantial amount of money in various denominations have been received by the commercial banks for onward circulation to their respective customers. According to him, the CBN had directed all banks to load their automated teller machines in addition to conducting physical operations in the banking halls through the weekends. Still on that same story, banks on Saturday opened their doors truly to weary customers to withdraw cash in line with the Central Bank of Nigeria's directive. However, some of the old issues persisted as Naira was still being rationed. In many locations in Lagos and Ogun states, as well as Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory, long queues of customers trying to make withdrawals were recorded at bank branches, with some of them expressing relief that at last they will be able to get their money after more than 2 months of scarcity. But some bankers are optimistic that the Naira supply situation will gradually improve in the days ahead as the Apex Bank strives to fulfill its promise of supplying the lenders with significant volume of the previously withdrawn old Naira notes. Well, Yemi Adamolekun, let me come back to you very quickly. Do you now have new notes? Do you have access? Because what I experienced on Friday was very strange. A bank saying that it will not accept a check because the accounts officer was not on duty. I've never seen anything like that. And the bank in question is Union Bank. And I hope the managing director of that bank will worry about how his staff will reject checks. They will lock their doors. They will refuse to give money to people who have money in the bank. I thought that was atrocious. And, well, maybe Union Bank is not the only bank that is guilty in that regard. Maybe, Yemi, you are luckier. You probably had access to your funds.
To be honest, I didn't try because well, the queues were, actually not the queues. So as I was driving past, I was actually going to stop. But because there were no queues, I suspected that they didn't have cash. So I didn't bother. And my colleagues kind of affirmed that the three of them that went to their different banks said the banks didn't have money, that it was on Monday that they would get money and that they should come back. Which then made me wonder, why force people to work on a Saturday? I mean, some banks were open from 10 to 4 on a Sunday. For what purpose? If they don't have cash to give out, why? Why do that? And I think the CBN has been really very, I'm trying to look for a charitable word because I'm on TV. They've been really quite irresponsible, let me put it quite bluntly, between not obeying between ignoring court orders, between this exercise of cat and mouse, we've burnt all the Naira, now suddenly you have Naira, old Naira notes to give people, you issue a circular for banks to open, and banks, given the very dynamics of how the banks and the central bank, their relationship, it's been a consistent pattern that banks just don't push back. Banks know they don't have cash. They were given an instructive to open and give people cash. They opened. People showed up. There was no money to give. So it'll be interesting to see what happens tomorrow. But I think it's been really very unfortunate that this whole exercise of we're trying to withdraw money from circulation, it will help our finances, our inflation rates will come down. And then the political side of it, of we're trying to curb vote buying, like literally all of the reasons they gave for putting Nigerians through the torture of trying to access our money in banks, I'm not quite sure any of it was accomplished. And again, as we were talking about INEC or NPC not doing their job, nothing is happening. The CBN governor is sitting pretty. There's really no accountability matrix. And I think that's a conversation we need to have another day. How do our ministries, departments, and agencies, what kind of accountability matrix do we have for them as a country and as a people? Because if consistently people, our duty bearers and our institutions continue to fail on their mandates and nothing happens, what is the incentive for them to do any differently?
Okay, Professor Akinterinwa, let me go to Professor Aworawo first. I don't know whether you have money in the banks. As a pensioner, looking for pension. So let me start with the people who may have more money in the banks. Professor Aworawo, have you been able to gain access to your millions in the banks?
Well, I wish that were the case. Yemi was struggling to look for the adjective to qualify what has happened. And she ended up by saying irresponsible. I would say mediocre and callous. What were they thinking? What was the Emefiele thinking? That Nigerians should be going to the bank at 5:30 in the morning, and after at 3 o'clock they get 3,000, and that was supposed to be the permanent feature? If the Supreme Court had not ruled, even after the Supreme Court ruled, they refused to obey. What were they thinking? That Nigerians will perpetually be under that condition? So it's like INEC, like CBN. Fortunately for me, I always expect the worst here. So when the news first came, I struggled and got a fairly good amount. So I've not really needed...
You got some millions. I kept that too.
I've not really needed to go to the bank, since then. At some point, I was assisting people who were stranded, and so my stock went down. So about twice, I just went to the bank and got some, replenishes, so to speak. Because when it started, something just told me that because the reasons the CBN was giving were not really clear. They were talking about terrorism financing and giving figures of how terrorism had gone down. Meanwhile, the terrorists were even displaying the new notes. So what was the link? It didn't make sense to me. So I foresaw that there would be trouble somewhere along the line. So I kept on disturbing my manager. At that time, we were not conscious of all of these possibilities. Fortunately, I got some reasonable amount of money that later I didn't have to now worry too much about. But what I saw in the course of the weekend, a few banks had, cash. We disappeared within a couple of hours because we were desperate to get cash. So there were large crowds anywhere. Any bank had some cash. So by those who came a little later didn't get cash. But they were open anyway, which was why you saw people just hanging around, no cash and all that. But the question is, why did we have to go through this? Why? Like Yemi said, all the reasons given for this currency redesign, none of it has now, played out as it was presented. Terrorism has not gone down. The so-called vote buying, it never mattered. So all the things we said when this whole thing started is where we are now. As everything has come to pass. So our appeal is that moving forward, this kind of thing should never ever happen again. Institutions should function as they should. Policies should be well thought out. Implementation should be effective so that Nigerians can be saved of this kind of agony.
Okay, let's now have the pensioners' perspective.
You see,
in this matter, Professor
Aworawo said, like INEC, like CBN. No. Like INEC, unlike the CBN. First point. You see, why work on Saturday and on Sunday? If you look at the queue in some banks, in many banks, people who knew and who know and who are most likely to continue to know that Saturday is the only day they have as free time. Sunday, they go to church. Friday, they go to mosque. When you queue up and you are suffering, the only way you can mitigate your suffering is to say, well, why not try Saturday when there will not be many people? I think that the idea of a Saturday, of a Sunday also, is an attempt to find solution to the problem. The problem, yes, I do agree with you. I share your viewpoint. I share the viewpoint of Yemi as well. Look, I can tell you that on Friday, I went to my bank, Polaris Bank. I went to the Montgomery branch to ask for the possibility of withdrawing 10,000 that could be allowed over counter or whatever.
Prof, 10,000 naira for the weekend.
No.
The whole professor, 10,000 naira.
You see, the issue is that for us, I am a civil servant, a public servant that refused to steal and prevented people from stealing. Even if the system is sanctioning me for being patriotic, for refusing to steal, the mere fact that I am chairman for Lagos State Anti-Corruption Volunteer Corps, if I'm doing this, I don't have money. I'm telling you that I don't have.
Don't be advertising 10,000 naira on
is,
international television.
Yes.
10,000 naira.
No, you see, the beauty of it.
You went to bank to withdraw 10,000 naira.
Look, the second reason for going there.
Can I not join this?
I want to buy, for instance, I want to acquire BTA, Basic Travel Allowance. We've been on it for 2-3 weeks. And they've not given me, and I will be traveling. So my problem is quite different from the one being explicated by Professor Aworawo. You cannot even have access to what they call basic allowance. What's the issue? I will still be going there tomorrow. So you see, the problem with CBN is that, no, I won't say problem. At least they succeeded in preventing, no, not preventing, in reducing vote buying. They succeeded in cutting it down. But the fundamental problem is that the new currency notes that were produced, allegedly withdrawn by some powerful, financial brokers. Where is the money? Why is it not in the system? I think that by asking banks to open to the public on Saturday, on Sunday, and during the week, is to enable retrieving the old currencies in exchange for new ones. The way we are now, they have not failed, they have not succeeded. You have new currency, and you still have the old currency. At the end of the day, competing. No, there is a fundamental problem. We are still dealing with a crisis of legitimacy at all levels. Level of political governance, economic governance, election management. We do not. The Yoruba people say, if you do not know where you are going to, you must know where you are coming from. But we are with a situation, coping with a situation whereby you do not even know where you are coming from, not to talk of where we are going to. This is most unfortunate.
Well, Prof, I've heard you, but this is a serious station. Don't let us glamorize 10,000 naira, Prof.
Well, why are you against the truth? Exactly. Why are you against the truth?
I wanted to talk about millions.
No, you see, I'm not a thief. I don't have my. You see, I went to an embassy to ask for visa. They now look at me something to say, is that what you have? I said yes. So you give me visa, fine. If you don't give me, I don't give it to that. But this is the truth. So people should not be against the truth. you know, Nigeria cannot make it. It's not a question of cursing. For as long as you condone, you know, insincerity of purpose, the moment you contest truth, you won't get anywhere. So it's better to be what I am now, try to manage, collect your 10,000. Look, armed robber is not interested in me because they know that they're wasting time for 10,000. No. So this is the issue.
Anyway, your point is clear, Prof. Let's take our next subject, and we'll talk about Ekweremadu. Former Deputy Senate President of Nigeria, Ekweremadu, his wife Beatrice, and personal doctor Obinna Obeta were this week found guilty of an organ harvesting plot by a court in the United Kingdom, specifically the Old Bailey. The case involved conspiring to bring a 21-year-old Nigerian to the UK with an intention to illegally harvest his kidney. Prosecutors say the organ was to be removed and given to the couple's daughter, 25-year-old daughter. The sentencing, according to the court at the Old Bailey, has been scheduled for a later date, specifically May 5, 2023. Professor Akinterinwa, let me come back to you. People have looked at this matter from different sides. Some people say, look, it's about compassion. Parents trying to save their daughter who was ailing, who needed help. Some people have said, well, how you do in your own house is not how they do in another house. I don't want to speak Yoruba, but I'm sure you understand that there's a difference in the jurisdiction in your country and the jurisdiction in other countries. Some people have said, well, if we had developed Nigeria better, and we have kidney transplant centers provided by our leaders, then of course there will have been no need for a Senator Ekweremadu to be looking towards England or Turkey for help for his daughter. But there is the human side of it. There's also the legalistic part of it. There's also the medical side of it. What do you think? As a parent, as an analyst?
You see, I cannot understand why any individual will want to destroy one person in order to ensure that his own interest is protected. No. I know that in terms of foreign policy interest protection, you destroy, you kill all others so that you can survive. This is international politics. It's there. The United States can, because of one American citizen, fly the totality of the U.S. military system to go and secure one life and kill all others. But now, that is within the context of law, polymus. If, for instance, Ekweremadu wants to keep the life, ensure the survival of his child, there's absolutely nothing wrong. People can donate. People can donate. My problem is from reports. If he induced the 26-year-old guy into error, if the guy didn't know that that was what he was going to do, explain differently. If, for instance, the 26-year-old donor was conscious that they will be going to remove one of his kidneys, I won't have any problem. Compassion can come in. Solidarity can be an issue. But for you not to make it crystal clear, and you probably induce the guy into error, no, I don't take kindly to that one. The 26-year-old guy has a father, has a mother, has a sister, has a relation. What is the impact, the implication of the removal? Generally, if you want to donate a kidney, it has always been at the level of nuclear family relations, etc. You can do this. But honestly, what has happened with the indictment in the UK is this. In Nigeria, they say anything goes, everything can go. The system in Nigeria will say you are not guilty. You go to another system, they tell you you are fantastically guilty. So, honestly, because I do not know whether the 26-year-old guy told lies, whether he initially agreed but later on disagreed, we don't know. But if Ekweremadu has consciously induced that guy into error, wanting to take his kidney contrary to his own will, please let him go to jail. There's nothing wrong with that one. In Nigeria, until we begin to bring all our leaders, all right, into things like this, they won't learn lessons. They won't. I sympathize with him.
Prof, the young man involved, described as a street trader in Lagos, 21 years old.
Okay, 21 years old.
The daughter involved, her name is Sonia, 25 years old. The legal reference in the matter, the Modern Slavery Act of 2015, under which we're looking at, since this was not a case of summary conviction, sentencing of about 10 years or life imprisonment under sections 5 and 6 of the Modern Slavery Act 2015 of the United Kingdom. But I get the points you have raised about you saying compassion should not apply. But there are many Nigerians who are saying, well, compassion should apply, because here this is a father trying to help the daughter, a father and his wife trying to help a daughter. Although the court and the Crown prosecutor said that's no defense in the UK jurisdiction. They were talking about exploitation. They were talking about cruelty. They were talking about not caring for the 21-year-old street trader purportedly involved. And organ harvesting in this particular case has been described as a landmark case. And these are the dimensions to it. But
you see, Robert, before going to David, please, the Nigerian system, the governance system in Nigeria is not related to compassion at all. The system in Nigeria has never had compassion for me as a citizen. I'm a citizen of Nigeria.
No, this is not about pension, Prof.
No,
this
it's not
about pension.
It's not pension. It's not pension at all. I can give you thousands of examples. Compassion. I have mentioned here that in 1994, for instance, 1994, look at 1994 to 2023. 1994, the federal government of Nigeria collected our money, saying they are going to build houses for us. We paid, fully paid. Today, 2023, they have not built anything, they have not refunded any money, etc. That is one example. And I'm telling you that even at the NI, I spent my money as Director General to keep the system because there was no money. Now I'm taking the institute to court because they must pay me my 4 million, my entitlement. So the system is not compassionate. And these leaders, all of them, these are the people that are there generally. It's not just Ekweremadu. All these people that are there, they don't bother. They are only interested in their own survival, but not, they don't want a united Nigeria. They don't want a progressive Nigeria. This is the issue. And this is why, for instance, you talk about INEC. You want to have election. What makes it difficult for you to be honest with election? Why are you unable, for instance, to count elections on the polling units and upload? Consciously, the mentality of the governance in Nigeria basically is dishonesty. Everything is dishonesty, political chicanery. No, we must stop that.
Okay, Professor Akinterinwa.
No compassion.
Let's hear from Professor Aworawo.
Well, I feel a bit differently. I feel very sorry for Senator Ekweremadu because of, Sonia. The information is that you can actually get the organ. There's a system in the UK where you can get the organ, but you have to wait for your turn. And sometimes, if your case is grave, you may die before it gets to your turn. So people become desperate sometimes to try and get the thing from some other place. But he made many mistakes. One, legal advice. He should have sought better legal advice to know the system in the UK and work according to that system. He didn't do that. And two, just like Hugh Davis, the prosecutor, said that, why didn't he focus on family, extended family? And why the focus on some other person that he will just pay some money and then he will come and donate his organ? They couldn't quite answer that question clearly. That was another area where mistakes were made. But the young man too, if we say Ekweremadu is bad by not having joined hands with others to develop Nigerian health system and all that, the young man too, David Nwamiri, is Ekweremadu-like. If we say Ekweremadu is bad, why do I say so? The information reveals very clearly that he actually agreed to donate the organ for £7,000. Somewhere along the line, he changed his mind. He was even trying to reduce his age to maybe underage, 16 or thereabouts, so that they will be able to hold Ekweremadu and punish him, more severely. So these are the issues we talk about. I feel very sorry for him, but I think he should have looked more towards the family circle and not try to pay somebody to harvest organ from him. But the young man too is not somebody we should hail as a victim. If he's a victim, yes, a victim. But it's a victim that has not manifested tendencies of a victim, properly so called, trying to concoct stories that will rope in Ekweremadu and make him free. I mean, that's not how things should be. Since in any case they said the organ now was not even compatible, there's a way they could have ended the whole transaction without getting into all of this very complicated process where people are going to go to jail. But I want to conclude by saying that since it is established that there was consent, but the consent, it was not as if it was altruistic. The consent was on the basis of money to be paid. We hope that the judge will look at that and not just focus only on the exploitation. And that should have an impact on, what eventually the sentencing will look like. That is just what we think or we hope will happen.
Okay, Yemi, your take on this subject, the Ekweremadu saga.
Well, it's unfortunate. I think I'll start with Sonia, because at the end of the day, the process was because a man's daughter needed a kidney. But I think what's also very disturbing really is the fact that, as Professor Aworawo said, there are processes around the world, from the UK to the US to India, where, there are laid out processes of how people donate their body parts. And the fact that, as the documents show, that none of their family members were asked is also not surprising, because in Nigeria we tend to be very secretive around medical challenges. So I won't be surprised if quite a number of the people in the Ekweremadu family did not know that Sonia had a kidney problem until this case came to light. And so in that regard, I think I can understand why the family members will not be asked, because it would mean that you're asking for help for an ill child, and that would possibly open a different kettle of fish within their family. But to the point that Professor raised as well, I don't think, given the Ekwerimadu's position, that they couldn't have found someone who would be willing to donate outside of their family. Now, what that would look like in the Nigerian context might not be the fact that you say, okay, you will donate and I would pay you X amount of money, but it would not be quite out of the ordinary if, 2 years down the line, you want to go to school and you go and meet Senator Ekweremadu and say, oh, I really want to go to school, I can't pay for it. He will pay for it. Now, there's no direct transaction with the kidney donated, but it is in our custom that would be expected. Let me put it that way. So why, and I think as has been said, is when you live in a country where impunity is the order of the day, where you think you are bigger than the law, it's not surprising that you go into another country and you think the same thing applies, that your default mode is to look for a shortcut. Your default mode is to figure out how to game the system. So is it that Senator Ekweremadu, who I believe is a lawyer, if I'm not mistaken, he is, exactly. So I don't understand how a lawyer goes into another country and it's not, you did not go into a same third world developing country. You go into a country that has predefined laws and you did not find out what the process is or what could be done or how, if you were find out what the punishment would be. So to Professor Aworawo's point, if the boy did agree, changed his mind, but he could change his mind in a country that allowed him to do so. But the last point I do want to make is that I think also from the British point of view, I found it very interesting that they were quick to take on the boy's case that he was a minor. So whoever he reported to, and that narrative, I think, set a tone for how this case eventually ended up, that it was not just someone that was paid for it, but already painted the Ekweremadus in a particular light that they really then ran with. But it's unfortunate, but I hope a lesson that that we might be doing anyhow, but our anyhowness stops at our border.
Well, let's take our final subject as we begin to wrap up. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, a few hours ago, touched down in Accra, the Ghanaian capital, at the beginning of a three-nation African tour that will also see her visiting Tanzania and Zambia. The move aims at bolstering partnerships and cooperation on security and economic prosperity between the United States and countries in Africa, as global competition, especially with China, heats up. According to Kirsten Allen, spokesperson for the U.S. Vice President, the trip is expected to reinforce the United States' commitment to Africa. During her visit, she is expected to hold meetings with Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo, Tanzania's Samia Hassan, and Zambia's Hakainde Hichilema to discuss a range of issues such as democracy, economic growth, food security, and the effects of Russia's conflict in Ukraine. Well, we're privileged to have two professors of international relations here. Let me start with you, Professor Aworawo. Is this, as I try to point out, part of the latest scramble for Africa? Everybody is seeing Africa as the last frontier. The Japanese, they are looking at Africa. The Chinese, everybody, you know. So is this a last scramble, if I may use that phrase, for Africa? Now the U.S. coming to Africa to counter the Chinese.
Yeah, in some sense it is. The frenzy, you know, to seek partnership with African leaders, African states, you know, in the past couple of months, the past year or so, in a sense, yes, to counter Chinese influence in Africa. And of course, in the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Russia too has shown intense interest. So to also counter Russia's, foray into Africa.
The Russians are looking towards South Africa.
Yes, South Africa and some other countries here and there, you know. So, but Africa can seize the moment the way they did during the Cold War. Leverage on, you know, this focus on Africa and, you know, seize the moment in the negotiations, identify what will benefit Africa and, you know, ensure that these things are done as quickly as possible because the international system changes, the dynamics change very quickly. And once they change, attention also shifts to some other things and some other places. So, you know, that's actually. But one final thing I want to say, it is not a silver bullet. I was in Accra in 2009 when Obama came. In fact, my plane and Air Force One arrived at the same time. We had to wait for Air Force One to land. It was as if all the problems of Ghana would be solved after Obama would have left. But none of that happened. People should have this in mind as all of these countries try to seek partnership with Africa.
Okay, we have just about 2 minutes to go. Very quickly, Professor Akinterinwa.
I think the visit is only partly to respond to the rising influence, rising profile of the Chinese. The basic dynamic of the visit, in my eyes, is simply because African leaders appear now to be driving along a different direction entirely, which the Americans are finding very difficult. The first point is simply that the Americans never expected that the traditional partners will vote against U.S. position at the UN, especially when the NATO countries led by the U.S. decided to sanction, the Russians. And now that prompted the Americans to decide on a new policy that they will sanction whoever accepts in the future to vote against U.S. interests. Now, the Africans do not listen, or they have ears that do not listen. So this type of visit now is to find a way of carrying African leaders together and bring them together along the same direction with the U.S. so that the Chinese, in the event of challenging the U.S. leadership, they can deal with that.
Okay, Yemi Adamolekun, just before we go, the final word on this subject.
Well, interesting. If I'm not mistaken, it's the second time, or in recent time, that Africa or a U.S. president would come to Africa and bypass Nigeria. But it's good to see Kamala Harris in Africa, first female vice president, and also vice president of color. So I hope she enjoys herself. I've left Professor to talk about the technicalities of foreign policy, but I hope she enjoys herself, and I'm sure they'll give her a few cute outfits to take back with her.
Okay, the plan is that President Joe Biden will visit Africa later this year, and maybe what the Americans are doing is they want to save the best, the biggest, for the last. And when President Biden comes this way, he will probably start with Nigeria. Well, let's see how that plays out. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From our entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now. And thank you very much for watching.